Question is, what is the last county board decision you had disagreed with, and what would you have done differently?
That's a great question. No? Oh, there we go. I'll just project. It's a good question. I think that's actually sort of a point of differentiation, right, among us. I do think that the approval of the budget, for example, was on balance the right one. I think the restraint that the county board has shown that Mary talked about earlier in keeping the tax rate steady at a time when so many of our citizens are feeling a financial crunch was the right one. But there were some decisions in the budget that I might have liked to see turn out differently. Let me give you one example, which is that our firefighters have been petitioning the county for a long time. They're down a fourth man on their fire truck, which actually puts us in the right area in terms of safety standards for emergency response services. I would have liked to have seen that show up in the budget, and a few other community responsiveness issues show up in our budget as well.
A couple of decisions recently I've been disappointed with. One is the I think, rather tortured compromise at the West Roslyn Highlands Park. I think that we could have worked harder to keep more of our green space. We are not a poor county. We can buy sites for fire stations. We don't need to trade away land for fire stations. We did that in Cherrydale. I worked on the task force that accomplished that. I think also I would have liked to see a little more foresight, and I don't completely disagree with this decision, but regarding the Artisphere, I think that the Artisphere is a valuable thing, but it should not be operated by the county. I think it's a nice centerpiece for what could be a small-scale convention business in Roslyn. There are several groups of incubators and other tech people who are interested in doing that, and I think they deserve our support.
I appreciate the question. I think like a lot of people in the room, I have mixed feelings about the streetcar. I will tell you that I was disappointed in the way that the streetcar decision was made and communicated to the public. There have been citizens who have given decades, years, hours, countless times in meetings after school, after work, on weekends, that had come up with that plan. And it's true that the plan had problems, and after the election last November, maybe it wasn't feasible politically, economically, etc. But I felt like the citizens were owed more of a process for that cancellation. So that's a decision that I disagree with. I also did not support the memorandum of understanding for the West Roslyn Highlands Park. So those are two examples that I would say I would disagree with the county board.
I will agree with Andrew. I think the unceremoniously into the streetcar project, the investment in infrastructure was not transparent. It wasn't involving the community. That was a lack of leadership. But we can do better. We have a plan to move forward. I think that connecting Columbia Pike, Crystal City, Shirlington, and Bailey's Crossroad addresses the problem, because it didn't go away. We still increase in density. Folks still want more efficient, more affordable, safer, faster transportation, and as your county board representative, I will provide it.
So, as a prelude to my issue, I'd like to just bring up that I serve on the Facility and Advisory Committee to the school. So it comes from that perspective, and I look at the recent decision about whether or not to build the school at the TJ site. And not so much the ultimate decision, because there is no ultimate decision, it's going to be revisited, but the process to me was one that was incredibly broken and flawed. Because the perception or the decision as it was communicated to the public was that the schools needed to do more homework. And I know full well that they did a lot of homework to see whether or not that was the right place. And what we had was a process where people became engaged thinking one thing, where another thing was actually the thinking of the county board. So in a nutshell, what I'd like to communicate is that the board has to be very, very clear about what it expects the public to engage on, and not ask people to give up their time, their weekends, and their hard energy to commit to delivering a public process only to have that process invalidated at the end when they were brought together under false pretenses.
Well, interestingly enough, I would probably agree with just about every comment that's been made up here tonight, as far as things that recent actions that people have taken some exception to. So rather than go over the same ones, I'm going to actually talk about something that happened in more real time for me as a planning commissioner, where under the Code of Virginia, we have to make a recommendation to the county board prior to them taking action. And this would be what we call the Bergman Site Plan, which is, I think it's called Vista Point, Vista Green or something now. Now, to be fair, I guess the county board has to look at things a little differently than people in the community sometimes do, or commissioners, and have to balance off competing priorities. But I voted against that project because I thought it was a bad precedent for Lee Highway. There were significant policy issues related to density exclusion, how policies were being applied, signage, limited term of affordability. Probably all more details than anyone wants to listen to at 8:15 at night. But I will say that that project, along with the East Falls Church Sector Plan, did more to spearhead Lee Highway planning and the Lee Highway Alliance than anything I've seen in almost 30 years in this county. So I'm glad of the way I voted on that.